All right, good evening to you. Mic check, 1 2 check. My name is.
Yes,
Good.
Yeah, let's do the good evening. Then we all open your microphone and say check 1 2. Good evening.
doing you
Good
too.
evening.
Check one, two.
All right. Well, welcome to this space. My name is Priscilla Regina Nalwoga, your host today, and we get to be powered by the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development, commonly known as CEHAD, as well as the French Embassy of Uganda. We joined the global call of the 2025 16 Days of Activism and specifically against gender-based violence. Now, 2025 is unique because we are joined together on this X space tonight to unite to end digital violence against all women and all girls. When we look to the statistics, the numbers are speaking louder than we want to hear. According to the recent 2024 Police Annual Crime Report, Uganda did record 12,424 gender-based violence cases. And these ones included rape cases to the tune of 1,600 and counting. And there was also the defilement cases that were up 12,317. Those figures are staggering. When we look to the national statistics, they're also telling us something that we need to pay attention to. Nearly 45% of women, and the women we are referring to in this case are the ones that are aged 15 years and above, having experienced some form of physical violence, either through their homes or at school or in their communities or in the social places that they go to. They've had an experience of physical violence. And then there's also the 36% that have experienced sexual related violence. We had these figures escalating and really skyrocketing during COVID-19, especially the eastern part of Uganda reporting terrible statistics in this regard. And of course, we want to know from police. We'll be hearing from police later on whether these statistics have come down about 3 years later. You also get to look to 26.6% of reported gender-based violence cases investigation taken to court. That's a terrible number, but I'm glad that we do have the court, the judiciary, well represented here, and they'll be telling us what are the challenges that they face in handling these cases. I know one of the things that is critical to the judiciary is evidence-based approach. Now, without evidence, it's very, very hard to bring justice for those whose, sexuality has been violated or they've experienced any form of violence that is gender-based. And also, when we're talking about gender-based violence, I know that this year we're focusing so much on women and girls, but we cannot also leave out the men because they are also suffering. It may be in silence, but they are suffering. And so that's where we stand. And yet, through the judiciary, you only have 4.8% resulting into actual convictions. So as we're confronting these stark realities, these are our mothers, these are our sisters, these are our friends, these are our colleagues, these are our workmates, these are our homies that are actually suffering gender-based violence. So we are inviting them to the table. We're inviting survivors. We're having stakeholders. We're having civil society, and we're having you, Uganda, that has decided to be part of this, to be able to really understand how best we can deal with the issue at hand. Now, powered by CEHAD, it is a Ugandan human rights organization dedicated to advancing health, human rights and justice. This is with a strong record in legal aid for survivors of gender-based violence. And so through their advocacy, their legal support, their community mobilization, they've been able to bridge justice gaps, amplify survivors' voices, and hold institutions accountable, especially for gender-based violence cases. We also do have this space being powered by the French Embassy of Uganda, which supports human rights and development initiatives in Uganda, working with local partners to strengthen democratic governance. They also are involved greatly in gender equality, and they're very strong on protection of vulnerable groups, which is our focal point on this space. women and girls. So backing up this express signals their commitment to fighting the digital gender-based violence, also fostering inclusion, and of course ensuring that every Ugandan's digital space is safe for each woman user and each girl user. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, this evening allow me to introduce to you our panelists that are going to be taking us through this dialogue for today. I'm going to start with Ayeta Harriet, Principal Development Officer, Mbale Local Government. And then we also do have Judith Nakalembe, who is the Legal Aid Officer with SEHAD as our panelist. We also do have her worship, Roslyn Nsenge, that is joining us on this X space representing the judiciary. And of course, she is also the General Secretary of the International Association of Women Judges, the Uganda chapter, previously having worked with FIDA Uganda for 5 years before joining the judiciary. So those are our panelists for now. We are also expecting to have police represented SCP Athaire Maureen, who is the Commissioner Child and Family Protection Department, is going to be joining us shortly, so we'll be hearing from her. We'll be starting with opening remarks from my panelists. I will start with Her Worship Nsenge.
Moderator, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for logging in to this space. This is a very, very interesting conversation. A conversation that actually, it is very, very pertinent. The issues that are going to be discussed today are very, very pertinent. Not just like issues to talk about, but these are issues that actually affect each and every one of us. So it is not them. These issues are not about them. But the issues that are going to be discussed today, gender-based violence, affects all of us. So thank you so much for logging in, and I hope to learn from the conversation. That is Roslyn, Her Worship.
All right, Her Worship Roslyn, I have a question for you. Have you faced any form of online abuse or harassment? And if you have, were you able to report it or you were not able to report it? If not, what were your reasons?
Oh, I think the space limits me a little bit. I don't know what kind of harassment as a judicial officer or
No, as a person, just as a lady.
as a lady. Oftentimes we get harassed as women. And I would also want to share my experience, both as in having worked in FIDA Uganda, also just being a lady and also as a judicial officer. Let me give you my experience, especially the major thing that I hate about working in court as a woman when it comes to issues of gender-based violence. Oftentimes, the gentlemen who come to court, they refer to us as female judicial officers as mamas, I just don't like that because I find it like someone is trying to harass me, kind of trying to put me where I belong, and I don't belong there. I am a judicial officer and I'm seated in that chair to adjudicate just like my male counterparts. But the moment someone addresses me in court as mama, mom, whereas they cannot do that to the male judicial officers, I think that is harassment. And the moment you ask them, why do you refer to me as mama? They say, but you're a woman. So they are seeing us as women first before they see that actually we are capable of doing the job that we are doing. Then when it comes to like any other girl, I just don't like maybe like when you're moving in the park, in the urban cities, and these men are touching all the women they find, it is indecent assault. I experience it. I see like even when I have to travel and I'm moving with my girls, I'm holding them, but someone from nowhere will just tap, a very private area. So for me, I think all the time we are experiencing violence, gender-based violence. And that is why when I was opening my statement, I said this conversation is not about them. This is a conversation that affects all of us. In the workplace, it affects us everywhere we go, even when we're in the social areas. You go out to swim, but you're afraid. You're afraid because certain things are going to be said to you. So thank you so much, Priscilla.
You know, when you were sharing your testimony, I remembered when I was a teenager, you know, like 12, 13, and, you know, you're fattening up as a teenager. I was working with my mom on Entebbe Road, and we were from a supermarket. And then as we were walking out, two men were on the roadside. And then they made some comments about my figure, because, you know, very big, and I had a big behind, and so they "Ii, chibate chitambule chirungi nga kino." And in my head it actually hurt so much I couldn't imagine what it was like for my mother in her mind. But anyway, that those are the realities that we are talking about. Judith, you are a survivor. As you're sharing your open remarks, what's your story?
Oh my God, Priscilla, I want to put you right. I'm not a
Wow.
survivor. I'm actually a
Uh-huh.
legal person who is fighting for the right of survivors.
Yes.
But having put it right,
Giving us your opening remarks.
I would like to say that the issue we're going to deliberate on, gender-based violence, remains a critical human rights violation affecting millions globally, and demanding urgent collective actions from all sectors of society. So we must prioritize survivor support, challenge harmful norms, and strengthen the legal and community responses to eradicate these scourge. So together, through commitment and collaboration, we need to foster a safer environment where dignity and equality for everyone is prioritized. So I'm glad to be one of the panelists towards this very important deliberation on such issues, and I welcome everyone here. Thank you so much.
We also have on this space a gentleman, as it has been alluded to. This conversation is inclusive. Thomas Arthur, who is the CDO Singulu Islands sub-county, and that is in Namayingo district. Thomas, you have been in spaces, I believe, where you have witnessed harassment of whatever form to women. How did it make you feel as you're giving us your opening remarks?
Okay, thank you, Madam Priscilla and my other colleagues. You are most welcome to this express. As Thomas Atham, the Community Development Officer in the Sigur Islands, you know islands where you have to cross with the boat. Sometimes we use the ferry to cross this side. As you can see, the GBV cases by now in the islands. According to me, I have been here for the last 10 years. But really, the issue is very crucial. And as we have come together as a team here for today, we need to bring out those issues. I've listened to Madam, her worship, Madam Isenge Rosalind. She gave a very, 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 very powerful testimony. And that's whatever she said is what is always happening. This now, for instance, this side in the islands, people the way they are living, the living condition is on the torture still under GBV. We have a place called the Maninga this way. It is a place called, it is a Keslam. It is a Keslam. But the way the people live, there's no privacy. People just talk the way they wish. These fishermen undermine the women so much. And this way, in my office, the beating is at an extreme and most of the cases I received in my office about beating, and these fishermen, they tell you, for us, we grew up, they told us a woman should be under a man. So I have, whatever I say, she has to listen, and if she doesn't comply, I have to beat. That makes me feel so bad. And yet we are all human beings, we are all people. So this issue of gender-based violence cuts across all, but it is for us all. So that's what I can say as of now. Thank you very much.
Wow, something that we have to tackle on later on as we have this conversation. The mindset of our people that are shaped primarily by our cultures, our customs, and our rituals. But we do have one that is now a champion, a victim, but now she's an ambassador. Ayeta Harriet from Bali. Hello.
Hello, Priscilla. In my opening remarks, I will first of all appreciate whoever has put aside time for this. Thank you so much. What I say about GBV is that it affects all of us. I will still say that all of us, including you who is listening to me and everyone out there. We normally put more resources at government to fight HIV, to ensure that there is development, to fight to eradicate poverty, mental illness, but we are forgetting the major cause, which is GBV. And GBV is not only limited to a home, a wife and husband. No, it is wide. It can happen anywhere, in mosques, in churches, wherever you see a man and a woman, any gathering where there is a man and a woman, anywhere, schools, mention but a few. So GBV is everywhere. Actually, most of us are survivors, I can say. But the gravity of the violence matters. So let's put our hands together and say no to GBV. Because if you don't, it's knocking at your door. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ayeta. Now, at the end of this conversation, 2 hours later, we're hoping that we're going to be able to promote understanding of gender-based violence, including the technology-facilitated violence. We are also hoping that at the end of the day, we will draw highlight to survivor experiences, the justice pathways, and persistent gaps. But also, we'll be looking to sharing Sehad's work and lessons learned in access to justice for gender-based survivors, gender-based violence survivors. And so please be part of the engagement. We also do have some questions that are already running on our space. The first question: what do you think are the biggest barriers survivors are facing when seeking justice for GBV, either online or offline? Whatever the case, there's justice that needs to be sought, but what could be the barriers? Then there's also something that Thomas talked about in his introduction. Men, these are, the culprits or the perpetrators of some of these vices, or strongly, or many of these vices. And men are being left out on these issues of GBV, or in terms of mindset change and engagement on discussions such as this one. And so there's also a question there that is being responded to. We'll be looking to those responses as we go on. Now, to get on to the order of the day, allow us to start with Ayeta. Ayeta, what is your
Yes,
story?
please. Thank you so much, Priscilla. I given a title to my story, and the title is I Felt Ugly and Worthless. And that is the time I would have enjoyed my young age as a woman, my early 20s, but I didn't do that. Nekesa Harriet is my name. I work as a Principal Community Development Officer in Mbale District Local Government. I use my voice to speak for the violated, depressed, abused, and isolated. And my message to the survivor out there, if you are a survivor, is there is light at the end of the tunnel. Please hang on. You'll see the light. My story is, I got married to a man I believed to be Prince Charming. He was really charming, soft-spoken, respectful, so I thought. But over time, complaints turned into control, cruelty. He monitored my everything, my phone. I had no freedom. My ATM was his. Mine was to go to work, but the money was controlled by him. He humiliated me publicly. There's a time, those who know Mbale, he dragged me on that Republic Street, pulling me, hitting me. I was a public figure, but full of shame. By then I was working as a CDO. I was isolated. I feared to befriend anybody because of the shame I had. He didn't allow me even to have friends. And if I would go ahead and have friends, he would fall in love with the girls. So I just decided to be alone. One night, he strangled me while in our marital home. I remember that night. I had to run with only a skirt covering my breasts. I was abused together with my children, especially my elder daughter that I got married with. When I sought help from police, I remember it is a gentleman that I talked to. With due respect, police officers, I mean we have wrong characters in some professions. The police officer, after narrating my story, painful story, the police officer told me that's love. The abuse was minimized and suggested reconciliation. I ran around looking for support. As a CDO was working in the Bududa, I didn't know Mbale very well. I didn't know where to go. Someone told me at the tax park, run to Ginger, there is an organization. I will not mention it. I ran to that organization. When I reached Ginger, I reached the organization, I found young girls. They didn't pay attention to me at all. Inside there, I was dying. But they didn't pay attention to me. I had to come back with no solution but leave this guy. After deciding to leave him, he followed me at my workplace and hacked me. He cut me several times, and that was the worst I would get from that marriage. He cut me over 15 times. I thank God for Kumi Hospital. They did the mending. They did the repair. I survived, but I now have scars on my body. Scars that remind me of the past. I lost a finger. I lost some bones. I have metals in my hands, my limbs, but I thank God I'm alive. There were so many barriers along the way. I want to cut the story short. The barriers I encountered, I failed to believe in myself. I failed. And that's why I say I felt ugly and worthless. So when I failed to believe in myself, I couldn't do anything. But also police failed to believe in me that time. Court, after the incidents, at one time failed to believe in me. My peers, my husband's relatives, if anyone had believed in me, I wouldn't have been cut. I would be perfect the way I was born. Fear of being blamed for the abuse. Those are some of the barriers that hinder us from seeking justice. You fear. They are going to blame you. And indeed, some duty bearers do blame. People can testify to that. There was no shelter in Mbale at that time. I was abused. You go to police. You run here and there. But you end up in the hands of the perpetrator. I didn't have information of the referral pathways. You know, when you're fighting in your home, there is financial constraint. Remember, my ATM was controlled by someone. So only if I had enough money, maybe I would do.
All right. Sorry about that. We had a technical glitch. As we do continue on, please be reminded that we are having an space about understanding GBV in Uganda, that we were having Harriet sharing her experience. She is a survivor and now a champion of gender-based violence. She was talking to us about her perpetrator. This is something that is a common phenomenon among ourselves as people. You meet strangers, you become friends, and then they, at one point X, violate you. And so what started as tall, dark and handsome, Prince Charming, coming on a horse, where the horse disappeared to and left her alone is something that is definitely worrying. And so as she shared her story, just to recap for those of you that have been able to rejoin us on this space, she was talking about how she met Prince Charming, and then shortly after meeting her Prince Charming, they get married, and she entered the marriage with a daughter and then had children thereafter. And a short while after that, she started being battered and harassed by her husband, whose social standing was he was a public figure in the community. He was well known and well respected in the community, which seems to be an underlining factor for the perpetrators, they always have a social standing to them, well respected in society. And then when she tried to engage different stakeholders, in this case, she did make mention of police. She says that police disregarded her and told her that that is love. That is how he's showing you love. And I know that is primarily from the fact that he was a man in society. And I've had this experience myself, a neighbor of mine also having had the same exact experience, battered, teeth are out, she's bleeding and her face is almost in tatters. When we went to police, the police told them the same, and it was a female police officer who received the case when she was reporting, and she was asked, what did you do to trigger him to beat you like that? You women, you're ever provoking your men. So the attention was not about the physical state of this person and how badly she was damaged. It was meant to be about something totally else. And so Afande will be helping us understand how they're dealing with this in her case. But also Ayeta made mention of the fact that she tried to go to an organization, an NGO, that she believed would be of help, only to find that there was an issue there also. Having employed young people who did not understand how to receive cases like Harriet's, she did not get the help she needed. Family, friends, peers all did not believe in her. And so this is why I want to invite Judith to talk to us about the things that have been presented as barriers. Failure to believe in self, police failing to believe in the victim, peers, friends, relatives also refusing to find the victim's reasoning and case solid enough to back the victim up, and then of course the judiciary also having a case in there, and of course the financial constraints. Judith, you've been able to work with these people and understand some of these barriers. Could you talk to us about the realities from where you're seated as a legal officer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Priscilla, and thank you so much for everyone for listening in. Listen to what in a patriarchal society, we believe to normalize dominance and violence. So many times the women are silenced because society has accorded power to the men, and hence so it brings a lot of fear and stigma, and they prefer to silence women who are looked at as inferior in families. And this is already cross-cutting even in the justice actors, because some of these justice actors, since they've not been trained to wear a gender lens while handling these cases, many times they use the societal beliefs, norms, and attributes to adjudicate or to handle some of these cases, and hence they also contribute to stigma and fail to actually help these survivors, which makes many of these survivors to go silenced. And I think this is what happened to the survivor who has just shared her really hurting story. And so if we talk about deep-rooted culture norms, these are some of the first trigger barrier that affect GBV prevention and response, and which call for us to do a lot of awareness and sensitization, but also build capacities of the different justice actors to follow the law and the principles of gender-based violence when they are handling these cases. But also there is another challenge of financial constraints. You realize that in most of the districts where SEHAD operates and where we do GBV prevention and response closely with the justice actor, we've observed that there is a gap in finances. There are low budgets towards responding and preventing GBV. And in one of the districts, like for example, Hoima, we've been doing a lot of advocacy to ensure that at least there is resource allocation for access to justice for survivors. But we were looking at the sustainability aspect, where we were lobbying the local governments to accord some money, the cities to accord some monies towards this. Because at the end of the day, if the police, the justice actors are lacking money to respond to cases, to do case follow-ups, to ensure that they go and arrest the perpetrators, then there is no justice in its sense. It means nothing. The survivors will just stay home and, cry. So the financial constraints is not only affecting the justice, not only the justice actors, but the judiciary as a whole. You realize that when they are doing these seasonal GBV cases that usually sit in the High Court, Many times they come seasonally, and times they will tell you that we lack the funds to ensure that the SGBV sessions sit. It means there is a funding gap even in the judiciary. But also when you look at the way they are prioritizing funding, they're only looking at the aggravated defilement cases. For example, I know we are speaking to the bigger GBV, being accorded to the High Court, but we have the chief magistrates like Her Worship Rose Inseng, defilement cases, but these ones are never prioritized to be funded. Now, these are the young girls who are in their that adolescent age, and they've developed, and this is the time when the men are trying to admire them. But these are the ones who are abused, and when it comes to access to justice, the chief magistrate who is mandated to handle such simple defilement cases, right now it's called defilement, but you can imagine even the naming was simple then, you realize that it's not funding unless there is a civil society organization that is coming in to step in and say that, okay, now let's see how we support these specific cases under the docket of the chief magisterial area. So even the way of allocating or prioritizing sexual offenses, they are prioritizing more of the aggravated defilement cases, which is 13 years and below, and they are leaving out those that actually were the active girls who are looking so good and attracting men, forcing them to sexually abuse them. They're not prioritized. So I find that an issue. So issues of funding are so high. I also want to say that yes, we have several laws and policies in Uganda. We are so good at documenting and coming up with laws on policies. We have the National Policy on Elimination of Gender-Based Violence, which was passed in 2016. We have the Uganda Gender Policy passed in 2007, the National Plan to Action for sexual and gender-based violence, the national strategy to end child marriage, the male involvement strategies. We have the constitution, which is the supreme law of the country. We have the Domestic Violence Act, which specifically came into place to address gender-based violence in a domestic setting. And this one specifically even shows us the referral pathway and how to actually litigate these cases. Then we have the Prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation Act, among others. But actual implementation of these laws is the challenge. So while we have many of them, in the shelves, the actual implementation is limited, and we are suffering from a chronic underfunding to ensure that we push these different actors to ensure that they do the needful. And then also I'll talk about the absence of a specialized GBV court that really sits to handle mainly GBV cases. While I say that we have special SGBV sessions that operate in the High Court, these specifically handle for aggravated. I already mentioned this. But there is no permanent specialized GBV courts that exist nationwide, causing a backlog and inconsistency in handling these cases. And you find that there is also procedural inefficiencies, such as several adjournments due to missing witnesses. Recently, we've been handling a session in Hoima, and some of the cases that were code-listed were from as far as 2020, 2021, 2022. You realize the majority of these cases were dismissed for want of prosecution. Why? There's been a backlog and delay in adjudicating over these cases, and some of the witnesses have relocated, some have already moved on, and they do not want to bring them back to these cases. So what does that mean? It meant that, of course, the hands of the judicial officer were tied, and the only option was to dismiss them for want of prosecution. So in my view, I feel like then justice was not seen to be done because of the delay that took place, and I feel like these people had not healed in a way. Also, I wanted to speak to inadequate victim support. While you're in most of these cases, these courts, not only for the smaller, the sexual gender-based violence, but also for the bigger gender-based violence, I've observed many women breaking down after, for example, as matters been adjudicated over and the sentences are not in favor of them. You realize majority of them crying on the court premises, but there is no psychosocial support. The person is yelling and crying, and all what happens is a police officer to come and shut her down and tell her out of the gate. that is what they can do. So issues of adequate victim support is kind of lacking. In some of these cases, a woman, for example, she's been a victim for long and she had retaliated by, for example, hurting the husband. I'm giving an example. Many times what happens if she has a baby and, for example, the file has been sanctioned and she's being arrested, the best they can do even at court promises, they will remove the baby and place the woman on the lorry, and that is it. She has not been prepared where the baby is going to be left, and the emotional trauma that comes with that really affects her even in prison. But also the baby, just, abruptly removing the baby from the mother is also, I feel, unfair on my side. So lack of psychosocial support and counseling leaves survivors at a retaliation and forcing ad hoc police arrangements, which is likely to cause them to retaliate. In most of the districts we've operated, we realize that there is lack of GBV shelters. And in some of the districts we've had to advocate for GBV shelters. Well, I appreciate that government has government-aided GBV shelters like Chibuli and the rest. Of recent, we've had cases and we wanted to house these survivors there whose lives were at risk. The men were threatening them. And my observation is that the shelters are not operational because, number one, there are no funds, so they can't feed the survivors while they are here. We tried to go to Chibuli shelter that the government is proud of, and we found a big padlock, and we couldn't access it, and the option was to go to the NGO shelter where we house this survivor. But what does that mean? It's not sustainable because we know that also the NGO shelters are donor funded, and it's not, sustaining. I managed to coordinate some of these shelters, for example, the ONET shelters in Busoga region, and then the Mifumi shelters in Masaka and Mbarara. But you realize that when the time when there are no funds, then the shelters are closed. Even when you try to pull the local government to come in and render support towards this so that they own it, many times when the NGO closes, it also closes. You only find grass growing up. So issues of inadequate support to reach out to survivors of gender-based violence is an issue that we need to ponder onto and ensure that the survivors access justice. I want also to talk about the judicial and institutional inefficiency. You find that most of the justice actors are not trained in GBV management and handling. I was in one of the districts where we operate, and I realized that some of these, actually, like the survivor mentioned, tend to again abuse some of the survivors. We've seen several media reports where survivors report to police and the police officers end up sexually abusing them at the counter. And in one of the districts, I observed that actually there are no one-stop shelters where they can have temporarily these people at police. So what happens? They detain them in the female wing where the perpetrators are being detained, the criminals. So what happens to this young girl who is going to listen to all the conversations of the criminals in the dock out there? It means she's already been named as already a criminal, yet she's a survivor who is going to report a case. But because what the justice actor is trying to do is to prevent her from being really filed at the counter by the men. So really women and girls are so vulnerable that even when it comes to reporting, it is an issue that is raising concern. And I worry most for also the justice actors, because at times, many times these girls report, and because of the hormonal imbalances and the emotions around it, they end up having their periods at the police stations. And who is buying the pads? It is the police officers who is going to use her little salary to buy the pads, to ensure they buy the water that these girls bathes, because as we speak, the mother has run to get money, the 50,000 for medical examination, police form 3A. As SEHAD, we advocated to not have extortion of money from survivors of sexual gender-based violence. But some of this practice is still ongoing in the communities, and the health workers, while we are trying to ensure we bring them on board, coordinate and take them through the directive prohibiting the extortion of money, you realize that some of them are still doing it, and this is preventing justice, but it's also bringing a burden to the police officer who is handling some of these cases where the mother has to go and look for 50,000 and she has taken a whole year without even handling 10,000, so that the child is ably examined for evidence, medical evidence collection, so that the matter can ably be
allow me to ask you of Norwendo Ramazi. because the things that you have cast to us are actually very critical to analyze them bit by bit, especially some of those that you have made reference to through the judiciary corridor. I'm going to ask you to mute your mic a little bit as you have a cup of coffee. Allow me to then engage Her Worship Roslyn Nsenge, who is with us on this conversation. Her Worship, some things have been pointed out as critical barriers to addressing the issues of gender-based violence, especially through the judicial corridor. Justice actors not trained in GBV management. There's also inadequate GBV post support. There's also absence of a specialized court for GBV that could have gone a long way in giving this, making this a priority for the judiciary and having justice served to the victims in time. Of course, there's also the issue of the judiciary system not prioritizing defilement cases or gender-based violence cases in court. And so we want to find out from your side as a judicial officer, are these the realities that you have to go through as you are extending justice to gender-based violence victims in Uganda?
Maybe something that I want to make clear is that when we, the judicial officers, make decisions that are affected by stereotypes or biases that perpetuate inequality and undermine the integrity of the justice system and its ability to provide just and equitable outcomes. So it just becomes incumbent on all judicial officers to exercise their power that in a manner that recognizes the inherent dignity and human rights of everyone, regardless of their status. The reason why I'm talking about this, because I heard from the survivor and the judicial officers are being so insensitive and the delays and all that. I'm just going to look at that in less than maybe a few minutes. So what I want to bring on table is that gender inequalities in the court system, of course, they are apparent in several areas, including, like the victim was telling us, including the way the victims are handled at court, the survivors of gender-based violence, and the court's attitude towards other vulnerable individuals. So I think what causes this is that I think just like any other field, we have what we call gender responsive adjudication. Gender responsive, why am I talking about gender responsive adjudication? Gender responsive adjudication requires using gender lenses in adjudication that reveals how content and approaches are gendered, informed by, shaped, or biased towards men or women's perspectives or experiences. So same as judicial officers, some may have other biases. Someone may be biased about something, or maybe we may need more sensitization. We may need something just like other fields. So for me, this is where I see a problem. I'm trying to reconcile with the survivor that maybe some people have argued that rather than offering redress to vulnerable litigants, especially the survivors of gender-based violence and the victims, that when they come to the court, they find that the hierarchical structure of the courts, with its emphasis on domination and subordination, there is a way in which it tends to perpetuate social inequalities and undermines the spirit of legal reforms designed to offer protection of vulnerable groups. So because of the nature of the legal system, the court processes, in that, if you're a victim of gender-based violence, you will have to go through the entire justice system, which oftentimes is very, very, I think, uncomfortable to the victims, in a way that, okay, something has happened to you, then you have to go to report to police. Then the police officers will have to send the file to maybe the office of the DPP for sanctioning and advice, perusal and advice. So the victim is still waiting up to now. Then from there, the state attorneys will oftentimes they have to actually advise the police officers on whether this matter can actually proceed before the courts of law. So this, meanwhile, the victim is waiting. So by the time this matter reaches court, I think the entire system becomes a bit hectic and very tough for the victim. And now looking at the judicial system, the court now, assuming that the victim is before the court system, what kind of justice are we rendering? Is it justice for ourselves as judicial officers or justice for the victims? And for me, this is where I see a problem that, and I actually advocate for gender responsive adjudication in a way that there is a way in which the victims, the survivors of gender-based violence, they feel very intimidated seeking for redress. Already they feel they have lost their power. And even there is also a question of agencies. Victims feel they are thrown into an arena where they are again made to feel dominated and inept, because in the court of law, it is, we're not going to hear your case, your matter in camera. It is going to be in open court, unless otherwise there should be some requests coming in, but the matters are heard openly, unless if they are children, juveniles. So someone has already suffered domestic violence, then the question of narrating, how did it happen? And the perpetrator is often standing just beside the person, and you have to face them off. And usually the perpetrators are known to the victims. So this humiliation, I think this is what puts the victims off. Then I think another problem that I see with our justice system in court is that the victims being unable to tell one story. You know, that freedom, you know, you feel like you want to tell somebody how it happened, or to tell it only partially, is a very common experience for litigants in our courts of law, especially in the magistrates' court. I personally, as a legal officer, when I'm handling these matters, I find like the space for the victims to tell their story. Midway as they are telling their story, they break down, and the court does not usually have that supporting system. We don't have counselors at court. I will give you an example at a later stage. So this kind of there is no space results in the voices of the victims or parties seeking redress being silenced. They get humiliated and be like, oh no, I think I will not come back to follow. They feel actually they are actually victimized again. This is the second time. Then silencing also occurs when the parties or the victims are given the opportunity to speak, but the content of the message is ignored. You know, someone makes a statement and feels that perhaps maybe it should have been given more worth, more significance than it's being given. So this silencing reinforces the victim's powerlessness, you know, someone feeling very, very powerless even before the courts of law, where they should actually feel very, very protected. So for me, I think that if we embrace, as judicial officers, if judicial officers could embrace what we call a gender responsive adjudication, this is how magistrates' powers can be used, you know. At times the victims feel like maybe we judicial officers, we are oppressing them and we are undermining their dignity, but because, you know, it is a question of evidence, and at times we don't know, as in we know actually what to do, but we can't save much. We are following, it is a question of evidence. We are hearing evidence, and the victim is breaking down. The most for the gender sensitive judicial officers, when the victim breaks down, we have to stand over the court. And when we stand over the court, it doesn't mean that is the end of the hearing of the matter. We may stand over the matter for just a few minutes, or we can even actually adjourn for maybe a few days, or even a day or two, or even a week. But that doesn't mean that we are not going to proceed with the hearing. The following week, whether the following month, we shall proceed with the hearing in the same way. So maybe just as I conclude, I'm looking at the major challenges that judicial officers face dealing also when the victims come before the court. Many perpetrators exert emotional, financial, or psychological pressure on survivors to withdraw cases or plead for lenience. I have handled a matter where a woman suffered gender-based violence. A man and the woman fought over a piece of meat. When the lady tried to pick a piece of meat from the gentleman's plate, this man threw the entire plate at her face, and she got a very deep wound on her head. And actually, this man was charged with attempted murder. When this case was heard and the gentleman pleaded guilty, this lady was manipulated by the perpetrator, because she kept on crying that, no, your worship, I did not come here so that you punish this gentleman. I came so that you talk to us and we live in harmony. So this often happens when there is economic dependency of survivors on the perpetrators. Actually, I try to interrogate and I'm like, no, this can't happen to you, and you're pleading for the perpetrator. And she was like, no, your worship, this gentleman has not paid rent. I don't have a job. We don't have food at home. He has learned his lesson. Please let him go. But the woman had a very deep wound on her head, and the gentleman had been charged with attempted murder. But you can see the victim pleading with court, no, your worship, I need this man to go back home. So these are some of the challenges that we face, especially with the survivors. There is also
Okay.
fear,
Worship.
intimidation, and community pressure.
I'm going to ask you to hold it right there, because another critical element pops up again in all the submissions that we have had on the floor so far. Thomas mentioned it, Judith mentioned it, Harriet mentioned it, and you have mentioned it. The perpetrator is always one that is well respected in society, and in this case we're referring to a man. And Thomas, you did make mention of the fact that men look down on women in the society that you are working with. You do have Judith also having mentioned the fact that there's cultural and customary norms that have given power to men over women, and they are exercising it. And these are not things of the past. These are things of today, people are facing domestic violence in their relationships, and it's not really primarily best at home. It's best in different communities, in workspaces, in social spaces, in any space. Gender-based violence is actually a reality. On that note, as I'm engaging Thomas on this, I want to find out from our listeners, and we do have some men on this space. We do have, I see Seth, I see Moses, Bonnie, I also see Ruhumurize. You also have Tayeva, Byron. You are men. Talk to us about this power that you feel has been given to you, that may be causing you to undermine a woman that you're working with or living with or having a relationship with, or what you think is actually triggering your fellow men in different communities to respond to women in such a way that causes violence and causes health hazards and causes death and causes divide in our society. So please drop those in our comment section, dear our men, We love you so much, but we want to hear from you. Why? Why? Because men are the biggest perpetrators of gender-based violence. So as you do that, I want to give special recognition to Stand Up for SRHR. We are also having another partner, World Hunger, Hilfe, Oxfam. Thank you so much. And Tassel, you're also doing an excellent job when it comes to helping us address the issues around gender-based violence in Uganda. French Embassy as well as SEHAD convening this X space, to which we also do want to recognize the Executive Director of SEHAD, Ms. Fatia Chiange. She is on the space this evening. So, Thomas, back to you. This male aspect is where you started from. How are communities actually engaging in dealing with this element and mindset in our societies when it comes to preventing GBV and supporting survivors?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Priscilla, Regina, and the rest of the members. We have various ways, initiatives, how we are preventing this GBV in our communities. First and foremost, we as community development officers, we are continuing with the awareness campaigns, whereby community leaders, like the religious leaders, the village elders, the cultural leaders, are involved in various awareness campaigns to promote behavior change. We have realized that the behaviors of men and women in the societies, people behave depending on the way they are brought up. So the issue, when it comes back to the issue of the parenting system in our country, Uganda, families where people were brought up well, when you see the way they are handling their homes, it is a bit okay. These homes where people grew up when they don't have anybody to counsel, anybody to guide, anybody to show the direction, we are getting problems, and these are the people who are promoting these GBV and cases in our society. So we are doing awareness campaigns where we involve the religious leaders, the village elders, and even the cultural leaders. Secondly, we are also doing education and trainings, whereby they will recognize the signs of GBV. We emphasize people to report cases through the right pathways and support survivors. But the challenge we are getting with when it comes to reporting cases, most of the victims in the village communities, they report cases to election chairpersons, and to make matters worse, chairpersons handle cases which are beyond their level. You find that some cases, like defilement cases, you reach a community when the election chairperson is handling such a case, it is an capital offense. So we are having challenges with our local leaders when it comes to those big cases. They sit with the parents of the victim and the survivor, then they negotiate. So that one is also a big challenge, but we are continuing to train and educate and also show where they are supposed to report. Then also we are doing the legal aid and the counseling. Survivors receive rapid aid services, counseling, and psychosocial support. I think I heard it from Madam Judith, where she said that there are some people, for instance, were at court, somebody has been won a case, they already is crying outside the court hall, but the only thing they do, the police officer just comes and tells the person, you go away. These people, they are lacking psychosocial support. Let me tell you, Madam Priscilla, I've tried to do home visits, but this sexual support services, it has helped a lot of families to keep together and reduce even on the GBV cases. People are there, they are dying psychologically, they are tortured, and this message of hope which we take to them, it makes them bring back the lost hope, and they continue moving together as a team. We are also doing partnership and collaboration, whereby organizations like SEHAD, by the SEHAD has played a very big role with Oxfam and the SRH that this they have played a very big role in government and the police and the South Attorney's office to investigate and prosecute GBV cases. This is also a very big. This is also a very big initiative by being done in the communities, together with even Uganet. Uganet also supports us when it comes to legal aid clinics. Even next week we are having a legal aid clinic camp in the islands, Lorwe. In summary, the above mentioned efforts aim at creating a safer environment for women, men, and girls, to promote gender equality and empower survivors to rebuild the lost hope. So those are some of the initiatives we are doing as Community Development Office Department to ensure to reduce on the GBV cases in our communities and also supporting our survivors. That's what I had for you, Madam Priscilla. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. You've actually opened a can of worms. And I know that there's some people on the space that would like to make a few submissions in that regard. If you want to make a submission, please raise your hand and you'll be given the opportunity to speak. You have talked about channels of reporting cases, and this is a conversation that I have been engaging with in most recent times. The channels of reporting, I don't know who stated them, that these are the channels. But of course, given that we have a societal structure that has the family as the smallest unit and yet the biggest unit of addressing any issues. If children being reckless at school, the school leadership will ask the parent to help address this. If you're having people, being funny in society, their families will be reached out so that they can give a supporting hand to help reshape this person. However, in the case of gender-based violence, we have seen that in many cases, if the victim is a woman, it will take long for the family to believe, later on to respond, later on to find a solution. And there's a societal or a culture that has been presented that, especially if a victim is a woman, she must first run to the family. If she doesn't run to the family, then that's another issue. Then there's the case of after the family cannot handle or the case is beyond the family's ability to handle, they'll bring in the local leaders or the community leaders. This is the LC1, the chairman, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, natula mu nsonga zino, nainga nsonga zino. The solutions Mr. Chairman is offering are not favoring the victim, they're favoring the perpetrator or the accused perpetrator in this case. Now, there's also civil society groups that have presence, but of course outreach may be limited, but they have presence, and those are reporting channels. But civil society groups being reporting channels, less considered. Police is less considered. Actually, sometimes when these victims go to police, they are first consulted and asked, did you first consult with your family before coming here? Does the local leadership, the LC1, the chairman, do they know, are they aware about your case? It's like when you're at police, if the other two parties, family and local community, are not aware of your case, then it's not valid enough. That is something that I want us to address as we're having this conversation. So Thomas, I want you to think about that and give us what the realities are on ground and what are the mechanisms we can apply in order to change these realities? Because if you have to wait for family to sort it out, then take it to local leadership, you're making room for more violence to the victim. So as I give a minute for Hope, I see Hope, you wanted to speak. If you are on, please share with us what you wanted to share with us. And then Thomas, I'm going to ask you to come back and respond. Judith, I will also ask you to come back and respond in that regard. Okay, Hope Vineyard is connecting. Let me talk to Harriet. Harriet,
Yes,
you
please.
are now enabling other people to find justice for gender-based violence. And the things that I have mentioned, what mechanisms are you using to help victims understand that it's not only family that they must run to or local leadership? There's other avenues that they can run to and get immediate help.
Yeah, and for sure there are really other actually when you're handling GBV, it's not a one man's thing. For example, it's not only for probation officer. It can't be handled by only court. It can't be handled by only only police, because there are other needs. We need to employ a multi-sectoral approach. For example, this lady who has been battered by the husband or the man, but in this case we are talking about the ladies, the women, the girls, has been battered by the man. Will need transport. If there is a car, if there is a good road, this lady will be able to go to either the sub-county, either the church, either any leader who can offer help if there is a good road. But imagine if someone is coming from Wanale, even if we have clear referral pathways, clear reporting channels, the person is going to be stuck. So that's why I'm saying we need to handle it in a multi-sectoral way. Everyone, if it's planning, let all ministries plan for this. It affects all of us. Let all, at the district level, let all departments plan for this so that we destroy, we kill this vice, we stop this vice. Capacity building. We know that, as we know, there are things we learn from school. At school, I remember learning about GBV. But when I went through it, there is a difference. I don't know whether I'm being got. It's different. So there is capacity. Even if I have trained in that area, we need more capacity and community engagement so that someone who has just been recruited, who has come from school, who is supposed a police officer who has been posted and has been given opportunity to handle the GBV desk, is given the knowledge to ably handle GBV cases. And they vary from person to person. But at school, we normally generalize. If we talk of recruitment, we are talking of duty bearers. We are talking of people who should handle. We are talking of the duty bearers. But who are the people being recruited? How is the recruitment being done for God's sake? Are you recruiting someone because the person is your relative, your friend, your girlfriend, your what? Are you thinking of this sensitive issue called GBV? And people who are trainable are those that have gotten the jobs in proper ways. Some people are not trainable. Even if you talk of capacity building, it can't change someone's minds unless the person has attained some level. So recruitment is also crucial. Let's talk about it for sure. Let's talk about it. I normally give an example of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. Everyone talked about it. It was everyone's business. Everyone had an idea of COVID. Everyone. And what happened? I don't know whether it has gone, but people say that for us Africans, we are strong. We are stronger than it. So that's what should be done for GBV also. Some people have made it okay. For example, when I was battered, some people blamed me. And even some people were using it as an example. There is a man who battered the wife shortly after. And he said, if at all they can do this to a sub-county chief, what about you, a mere housewife? So it becomes okay at times. This is not okay. Let's talk. Let's make noise is no more. Most of the issues have been spoken. I don't want to repeat, but I appreciate all the interventions the previous speakers have mentioned. I was just adding up my story. I eventually got justice. My perpetrator was sentenced to 15 years in imprisonment. I rebuilt my life. I got a home for my children. I am confident. I feel beautiful. Yeah, I am. I am beautiful. I am beautiful. And I want to thank everyone out there. that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And the duty bearers, please do something, say something. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ayeta. And yes, indeed, you are beautiful. Now we want to hear, as we're moving forward, the realities are here and they may be here to stay for a while. But that does not stop us from addressing the gaps that we have had being mentioned since we started this dialogue and seeing how we can forge a way forward. There's something that has been mentioned, and I believe it's critically the best way forward: multi-sectorial response to gender-based violence and bridging the gaps that are hindering people from actually addressing this and finding justice for it at the same time. That being said, Judith, I would like to talk to you and ask you. We have most of the conversation has been tilted towards a domestic setting or a community setting, as family centered primarily. But those are not the only places that people are facing gender-based violence. What are the other spaces in which people are facing gender-based violence, and what is the nature of the violence that they are facing? All right, as Judith does come on, look into some of the responses in our comment section. There was a question: how can men and boys support the fight to end violence against women and girls? The hashtag 16 days of activism, UG, and Stride Action. You came through to respond and say, let's always engage boys and men at all levels of fighting gender-based violence and not always look at them as the perpetrators. When involved, they will always feel considered as not just perpetrators, but like consultants. And let's make them GBV prevention agents in communities. Okay, that being said, I would like to find out from Thomas, from Ayeta, and also from Judith, and also from her worship, Rosalind, how this can actually be made a reality in your respective capacities. How do we make our men, our boys ambassadors, or change agents when it comes to gender-based violence in communities? Thank you so much, Stride Action community. I also want to look to some of the comments coming in here. Let's invest more resources towards information dissemination on gender-based violence to remote communities where people still live with primitive life and cultural norms overshadowing the power to report GBV cases. This is where mothers are dying in silence because of culture and the gender stereotype. All right, thank you so much. Then we also do have Vince making a response there and saying, because of the nature of the local legal system, and the local legal system is what we were referring to earlier, that it must be first reported to a family member. If they don't believe you, then there's nowhere else you can report. Should they perhaps believe you but can't handle it, then the family members are the ones that invite the local leader into ensongas, and when the local leader comes in, they try to manage the situation at that level. They try to encourage the victim not to report to official channels such as police or civil society organizations or judiciary directly, simply because, again, they paint this picture, by the way, they want to protect the image of the family. I know that Harriet's story pins this very well. You have to protect the image of the family. Now, in essence, what they're saying is protect the image of the men in our society, because if you distort the image of the men in our society, then you're going to break down society. So wokwata kumukulu ate yatuwaka sente yatubeza o takale erikoleyo tutya, those kind of things have definitely been a distortion. So because of the nature of the local legal system, justice is ending up structurally delayed, and when the time to hear their matters arrives, oftentimes victims end up relieving trauma, hence the need for reforms facilitating gender-responsive adjudication. And then also Hope Vineyard, you had something to say. Hope, if you can text it, Hope Vineyard Foundation, please text it. Byron Mwanja says, let's identify male champions and use them as examples to other men and boys. Thank you so much, Byron. And to the other men, would like to hear from you. How do we turn this narrative in our society so that men can be inclusive in these conversations, but also more so in the solutions? So let's hear from, I'll start with Her Worship Roslyn. What mechanisms do you believe have already maybe been deployed through the judiciary corridor or can be advocated for in the judiciary corridor to deal with this localized structure and the reporting line that has distorted and delayed justice for victims especially?
Okay, maybe like I think like you read my bio earlier. You mentioned something that I am the General Secretary of the International Association of Women Judges, the Uganda chapter. So it is an association for women judges, but we have almost, I think, 20% of our members are male. 20% of our members are male. And this is done intentionally. And we would want to bring as many male judicial officers on board into the association as possible. And the reason is we want to see gender responsive adjudication everywhere throughout Uganda. And actually what we've done, we've tried to sensitize fellow judicial officers. Regional wise, we've gone to, all regions, we've sensitized them. And this actually reconciles with what I think Thomas someone was bringing on board, that let us get male champions. Even in the judiciary, we have male champions, and the association has those male judicial officers. And actually, when you see the decisions coming from these male judicial officers, you'll actually read gender lenses in these judgments. So we are doing that already. And then maybe I've seen so many courts, what courts have done to lessen the intimidation of maybe victims of gender-based violence is that I have seen victims, like the sitting arrangement in the courts. And we have tried as much as possible to hear these cases in camera. We try as much as possible to a point that we always ask, if you're not part of this matter, please leave the court so that the victim can be in position to tell their story. So we have made a fostering environment where parties can tell their stories without fear of being mocked or ridiculed, by ordering people who are not involved in the case to leave the court so that the victim cannot be scared of the crowd. So we've also tried to ensure that the victims receive speedy and fair trials. And also we avoid as much as possible to use inappropriate language during the sessions.
Her Worship,
Language
allow
that
me to interrogate something that you have mentioned. You are trying to ensure that there's speedy justice that is given to the victims. When you say speedy, what's the time frame that you have been able to achieve in addressing justice being delivered to a victim?
even that same day, as early as a day, we prioritize these matters. And also what I want to bring to your attention is that judicial officers have been sensitized in a way that now they are practicing judicial activism. As early as yesterday, my colleague at court called me and she said, Your Worship Roslyn, we have a lady with a baby. She has nowhere to go. She is a victim of domestic violence. She used her phone and she said, I am not leaving court until when we find a solution for this lady. And later, after 30 minutes, she called me back and she said, I have good news. I was like, okay. She was like, I have called a certain organization and they have got shelter for the lady and for the baby. Isn't that quick justice? Isn't that judicial activism? Isn't that practicing gender responsive adjudication? So you can see where we are going. The future is very, very bright. Judicial officers are so awake. We are so alive to gender-based violence, and we are trying as much as possible to see that we assist and we help victims of gender-based violence, then the court where I work, we actually have rooms for victims and witnesses, especially when babies come in, mothers with babies. We have, I think, almost all the courts in Kampala now. They have play areas, they have waiting rooms for victims of gender-based violence and also for women with babies, and play areas for the babies. Do I still have time or I'm done?
I think what you have to submit is forging a way forward. So please, you can continue 1 more minute.
Yes, and also we also try to see that that the victims feel comfortable, for example, issuing protective orders against the perpetrators when they come to court. Because, Priscilla, you're asking me about quick justice. How soon can this be? It is immediate. Somebody need to be protected from a perpetrator. Whereas they could be people known to them, husband and wife. No, we have gone ahead and we have issued these protective orders. We are brave enough, we are courageous, and we are acting within the law. There is nothing outside the law that we are doing.
All right, thank you so much. Maybe I'd also like you to just speak briefly into organizational related gender-based violence and what would be the recommendable reporting channels or channels of seeking justice that people have experienced gender-based violence through organizational spaces or other social spaces.
Other social spaces. I think the NGOs like SEHAD, FIDA, there's some organizations which can come on board. LAC, I think there's also Legal Aid Clinic, because the fact that I come from the bench, I'm a judicial officer, matters cannot be reported directly to court. They have to go through the entire justice system, like police, that network. But if the NGOs like SEHAD, I have seen the lawyers taking up some, perpetrators seriously. I have seen some organizations really, when they come on board, they really assist us. And also the fact that they bring it to our attention that, your worships, in case you're faced with this challenge, if there is a victim who needs this kind of assistance, please call us. That is how we have been relating with them, so that we don't get stuck. That is, we get the appropriate redress for them, like shelter. Some of them are stuck, and some of them just need legal aid. So the lawyers are there. SEHAD is helping, and there's also Afya na Haki. There's also FIDA. There are organizations that come on board to assist.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Hawashi Roslyn. All right, so we're going to be looking to closing remarks from our panelists, but now it's time to open up the digital floor. If you have a question, yes, please.
I apologize for that. It was a network.
Okay, we're going to have you come in and speak to us a little bit in a bit. So to our friends that are on this space, AJ, Ruth, Sifuna, Sally, Zaitun. We also do have Byron, who has shared another comment here. Allow me to pick Byron's comment. We are also asking you that are listening in, please share your views, your comments, and especially in forging a way forward. What are some of those mechanisms or strategies that you think can be adopted by different stakeholders in order to have a collective multi-sectorial response to gender-based violence? Byron Mwanje says GBV is about abuse of power. Very true. We should engage the centers of power. The center of power in a family unit is a man. And so that's why primarily the man ends up being the perpetrator. The center of power in an organization is its leadership. It could be the human resource leader. It could be the MD, the ED, the CEO, the financial head, the COO. When you look to the religious environment, our religious leaders, who are mostly men, also end up having that power, and they can use that power to abuse the other gender. And so cultural institutions, the same, and these are mostly led by men. So their voices can stimulate behavioral change. And that behavior change can be to the negative or positive, but we are really hoping that they can use it to stimulate behavior change to the positive. All right, so as we're coming to the crown of our conversation. I think I wanted Judith to make a comment on the other spaces in which women face gender-based violence, organizational spaces, social spaces, away from the family units. What are the other spaces that you have received cases from that are around gender-based violence? And also, what are the available channels of seeking justice? We do have Her Worship having made mention of the different CSOs that are existing in our society, in our communities, that bring justice closer to the victim. So without mentioning the CSO factor, what other opportunities do we have? All right. As she is connecting, Ayeta, I also want us to talk about there's the primary victim and there's the secondary victim. Ayeta, in your case, you were the primary victim, but you had a secondary victim, which were your children. How were you able to seek justice, emotional justice, community justice for your children? Because they also extended, by extension, they did experience the gender-based violence.
Thank you so much. That I'm still doing. Let me share this shortly. I remember when my child wanted to campaign for leadership when he was much younger, and the teacher was like, "No, for you cannot be a leader. Your father cut your mother." So they are equally really stigmatized. But I use church. Church preaches forgiveness. I talk to them. I personally talk to them, and I explain to them that, I explain to them actually so many things. I'm a counselor, and I try to talk to them myself. I also use the bigger family. Those are my parents, my sisters and brothers, to talk to them. Actually, then today I was talking to my son. He's in senior 3, and there is a man who came to him and was brought up everything of the past, and he felt so bad. Said, "Why? I don't know this man. Why is he telling me all these things?" But I prepared him. I told him, "You can't run away from this. It's going to happen even when you're much older." Even when you're married, someone will always talk about what happened to your mother. So take it easy. You can't stop everyone. You can't control what everyone tells you. So I want them to feel that it's okay. It's okay for someone to say something which is not good, because they know why they are saying that from their perspective. So I just counseling them, talking to them, and also there are spaces that I introduce them to. Like we have Power to Youth in Mbale, and most of the meetings they call, I ensure that they join those meetings, and they also help me. They encourage them, they talk to them, and so many other organizations that have helped me out. But I acknowledge that I have strong children. I really do. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. We also do have one of our partners of this dialogue, and that is TASO. We do recognize that the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence also coincide with World AIDS Day. And so December is pretty much where we get to advocate and address continued issues surrounding HIV/AIDS. One of them right now pressing is that on an annual basis, we're seeing an increment in new infections, 37,000 and counting, according to which is really not a good statistic. And so we want to invite Faith, who is from TASO, to talk to us about that. What are some of the resolutions that are coming through the different spaces in addressing HIV and AIDS and ensuring that we have 0 new infections by 2030? Good evening to you, Faith.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. Yes, I'm Faith from SEHAD, and I wanted to also address gender-based violence from a public health concern, which deeply links this gender-based violence to HIV, where we see that the violence is not only just a criminal or a social justice issue, we are also seeing it directly shape women's health outcomes, their ability to prevent HIV, and also their capacity to stay on treatment. So we see that survivors of gender-based violence are facing higher emotional vulnerability to HIV transmission due to forced sex, trauma, and limited power, basically, to negotiate safer sex. And at the same time, persons living with HIV are often experiencing this violence triggered by stigma, blame, or disclosure, which either disrupts their treatment or their adherence and drives them away from seeking health facilities. So basically, this vicious relationship takes us to a point where health systems need to move beyond just treating the physical injuries or offering available tests in isolation of integrating screening, violence screening, mental health support, and also provision of these stigma-free HIV services as part of routine care, so that we are able to look at GBV through the public health lens. And as a country, I believe this would help us to design holistic, survivor-centered interventions that prevent new infections and also strengthen treatment outcomes and also protect the well-being and the dignity of the women and girls. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Faith. Job well done. Now, we want to start rounding up this conversation, and we've looked at our realities, we've looked at our gaps, and we've touched a little bit on the road ahead. And so in our closing remarks and looking to the road ahead, so that the next time that we are here on this space, 365 days later, we will have a bridge that would have, crossed, or a milestone would have hit, or an achievement that would have hit out of the recommendations that are going to be coming through the voices of our speakers. I'm going to start with Judith.
Yeah, thank you so much, Priscilla, and sorry for the bad network. As I close, I would like to say that the one thing that is making us lag down behind in GBV prevention and response is a failure to have budget allocations for the GBV interventions. And hence, the justice actors are just struggling to ensure that they respond and prevent this particular challenge that is affecting everyone in the community. So once we advocate for budget allocation, because I'm aware there is a conditional budget at Ministry of Finance, and when money is allocated, it only caters for the bigger gender for the elderly, gender for the youth, but nothing has been allocated for specifically GBV prevention and response. So there is need to do advocacy so that at least the justice actors are able to do and play their role, as opposed to naming them as corrupt, yet their hands are tied and they do not have funds or finances to do their work. And there also there is need to establish permanent specialized GBV courts, so that that are dedicated mainly to handle GBV cases, so that it can reduce backlog of cases. I already mentioned that in Weimar we were handling cases of 2020, 2021. And what do you think about a survivor who's been waiting for justice for that long? He or she loses interest. Then enacting pending legislation. We have the National Legal Aid Bill, which is still at bill level and it's not yet an act. So if we have it, at least the state will be in position to fund legal aid representation, and that will address the issues of finances, but it still goes back to issues of budget allocation. And also, I would like to speak to the fact that there is need to build capacities and train judicial officers, train justice actors, so that they wear the gender-sensitive lens as they're handling these cases. Then survivors will not shy away from reporting cases, but because they'll be having people who are gender sensitive and they're able to handle their cases well. We need operational one-stop centers at police, at the different units, at the probation office, so that survivors are handled well. They're offered psychosocial support. They are counseled. They can access PEP and Postina, so that they do not get pregnant or have HIV, because that again will traumatize them in the future, even when they've succeeded in the cases. So there is need to ensure that the referral pathway is strengthened and it has all it takes to respond and prevent GBV. But above all, we need to ensure that communities are sensitized to report cases, to ensure they appreciate the referral pathway, but also the referral pathway to be in position to work. And finally, we need to institute monitoring mechanism, create an independent GBV justice oversight, like a board reporting to Parliament annually on conviction rates, survivor satisfaction, and the SDGs indicators with power to recommend sanctions. That then will be in position to ensure that the justice actors are accountable and everyone is playing their role under the referral pathway. I submit.
The call for accountability. Thank you so much, Judith, for your submission. Thomas?
Yes, thank you, Madam Priscilla. A lot has been said. I think we are summarizing and we are giving a way forward. How can we improve to see that at least in the next 365 days, we will see the reduction in the GBV cases. I have some 2 points to put across because most of them have been said by Madam, the former speaker, has been said. But what I can say, we need to strengthen the referral pathway and also the follow-up. We have tried to forward the cases, we report cases, we refer cases, but when it comes to feedback, it is a very big challenge there. We need some strengthening on the referrals and follow-ups. You get a case, but when it comes to reaching to the other place where it happened, it is a bit. Now, for instance, in the Sigul Island, I'm in the island. There are some places which need to cross with a boat, but I have no access to how I can get to that place. So we need to strengthen such things. And also, this issue of the technology integration, whereby we should embrace the technology like the hotlines, the apps. The Ministry of Gender has developed very many different apps on how to handle GBV cases. But the biggest challenge, it is the network system and also the feedback. There's a PAL, I think it's PAL, something of that kind. Then there's this out of 116. They always call us, they have got this case, they have want to follow up, but we don't know where that case ends. So we need also to strengthen that in the technology integration, whereby all stakeholders we are by to that, and we support the community. Then lastly, I remember her worship, Madam Senga Rosalind said about the issue that they always get cases. They sentence the perpetrators, but then the survivor comes and pleads, Madam Judge, help me, this is the breadwinner at home. How are we going to survive as a family? So these things of the livelihood support, it is one thing, and if we could also address that issue whereby the survivors and how are they supported in terms of livelihood, so that we can reduce, because the moment that person is not again suffering, again he will be tempted to go and be again assaulted somewhere. So those are the things we need to address, Madam Priscilla. Thank you very much, and everyone.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and it's been a pleasure hearing from you. I'll be taking one more comment, but to our panelists this evening that have helped us understand the gaps in gender-based violence in Uganda, the realities, and the road ahead. Thank you so much. A special thank you to our panelist, Ayeta Harriet, who is also a survivor, but me, I choose to call her a champion, also serving as Principal Development Officer in Mbale local government. Harriet, thank you so much for sharing your story. You're such an inspiration, and we hope that your voice can reach the unheard and justice be served through you. We also want to recognize Judith Nakalembe, Legal Aid Officer at SEHAD. Judith, thank you so much for also having a strong voice, continuously advocating for the things that you have talked about, such as addressing the budgetary and funding gaps, specialized courts to reduce backlog, enacting pending legislation, and capacity to build places that have and our forces that can wear gender-sensitive lenses. I believe that her worship already has the gender-sensitive lenses on her. Chief Magistrate Kawempe, Chief Magistrate's Court, her worship Rosie Nsenge. Thank you so much. Then, of course, our community leader, Thomas Arthur. Thank you so much also from Sigulu Islands. This is a sub-county in Namaingo district. Thank you so much. Your voices have been duly heard. Speaking of voices, I have a few more voices in our comment section that I'd like to also look to what they have to share with us as we have a closing to this conversation in about 4 minutes. Byron 1J, thank you so much for having been an added listener, but also responding to the conversation. GBV, you say, is about abuse of power. We should engage the centers of power. That's something that you had highlighted earlier. And then Esther Dafar is also saying, once we stop normalizing GBV in our families, communities, society, and the country at large, and if we get intentional about providing relevant information and education on GBV to every Ugandan, the world will be a better place, and we shall reduce the cases of GBV. Addressing this actually is very interesting. In reading your comment, it triggered me. How do we involve the education system in order to help us extend relevant information so that when these young boys and girls have this information, they can, come up to be better citizens, more responsive around gender-based violence. A voice of Sabay says, GBV is actually bigger than we always see. That's true. I strongly believe that the judicial system ain't the best path to pull this vice to a stand. We have to go back to the drawing board and make the likely victims self-reliant. Voice of Sebei, thank you so much. Hope Vineyard Foundation, you say, we have got clear GBV referral pathway on display. How can established CSOs help in protecting rural social workers who are actually being spotted and targeted by perpetrators in rural areas with the aim of harming them just because of attending to a victim of gender-based violence? Now, this goes back to the question that we were trying to find solution to. The line of, or the chain of addressing GBV in our communities has primarily been structured and centered around family. If it's not ended by family, then the community people. If it's not ended there, then it can only be upgraded to others should things be bad. But unfortunately, things being bad is always someone losing a life, someone losing a finger, someone losing something. And that, in a way, affecting the human rights. So, Hope Vineyard, that's definitely also a critical element of the conversation. We need to follow up on the protection of the protectors. Wafula Ham Friends, you also saying we are following from Namaingo. Thank you so much, Wafula, for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be your moderator in this conversation. It's far deep and rich in terms of how we've been able to talk about it and bring it to your space, wherever it is that you are. And so a special thank you to our guests and panelists, a special thank you to our audience, and more so those that have been able to actually come out and respond. At the end of the day, as we're marking the 2025 16 days of activism, friends, I'm really calling on all of us to actually take concrete steps. Report a GBV when you witness it. Oba omuntu omumanyi oba tomumanyi, report so that at least something can be cross-checked. Amplify survivor voices without exposing them to further harm, and then also demand institutional accountability at every level, which I believe Judith made highlight of. And of course, let's use our spaces, our organizations to challenge violence and not to normalize it. So to the institutions represented here today, we believe that your commitments cannot end with this space, but they will continue on. To our friends that have joined this space, that are watching, survivors are counting on you and me to take more action. Amplify voice for Uganda's future is depending on it. And of course, on behalf of SEHAD, the French Embassy in Uganda, TASO, and all the other partners that we've had on board for this evening, thank you so much for standing with us. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for choosing to be part of the solution. Together, let's turn today's conversation into tomorrow's change. Let's unite to end all forms of violence against women and girls. I am Priscilla Regina Naluoga, your global moderator. I thank you and good night.